Israelite Life, and we're living it together. This is Israelite Life for us. This is Israelite Life, and we're living it together. This is Israelite Life for us.
Shalom, family, and blessings to you. You are tuned in to the Israelite Life podcast with Prophet and Katryna. Let's dive right into this exciting episode.
Shalom, family. Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Barakatham. Welcome to Israelite Life.
Yes, welcome.
Let's get right into it. As you can see displayed here in the middle of the screen, we have a copy of this amazing book called The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. Over the course of this season, this whole first season, we are going to be going chapter by chapter through this book because this book is amazing at helping people improve their relationship.
Indeed, I'd have to agree. A lot of wonderful information in here.
If you want to get your own copy of this amazing book, there will be a link down in the description. You can click there. It is an affiliate link, so you can go ahead and buy it, and it will also help our podcast out a little bit. But that being said, I believe this book has about 14 chapters, and let's dive right into the first chapter. What we're going to be doing is discussing some of the things that that Gary Chapman talks about in the book, and explaining how people can apply those things to their own life. Yeah?
Yeah, I'm down.
Let's get it then.
Okay.
So what do you got? So I've read this book many times, actually, and getting back into it again now is the perfect time. People may not know, depending on when they're watching this. This is Katryna and I are getting married literally on this Sunday.
Yes.
Yeah, and I believe that a lot of what I learned from this book gets applied a lot in our relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would
So,
have to say.
what do you got? What is one of the first things that stands out to you in this book?
Okay, so the conversation on the plane was just fantastic. It reminded me of a lot of moments on the plane. But the one thing that stood out to me, it says, let me see, on page 18, it says, did your love evaporate immediately after the wedding, or was it a gradual loss? I wrote down on here, great question, because most people think that way. They're like, it evaporated. It just went poof all of a sudden. And that's, I haven't found that to be true in my communication with other couples. Like if they begin to recall, things began to do that over time. They just didn't see it that way.
It's a gradual thing, not a poof, but when it finally hits you, it feels like, oh, this is a change overnight.
Exactly. Yep. So that was one of the things that stood out to me. And I found it with different conversations. It was quite different.
Yeah. So this first chapter is literally called What Happens to Love After the Wedding. And what ends up happening is everyone is in this infatuation period where that other person can do no wrong in their life. It's because they're tolerating. And most people are not willing to say what it is that they like, what they agree with, what they disagree with within the first 90 days of a relationship.
Right.
I know. So I used to be a relationship counselor. Before there was an internet and people were doing telephone dating, I was a telephone relationship counselor. Literally, I would listen in on people's conversations and then give them a little advice here and there. So I have quite a bit of experience in this. And in that, I learned most people are not willing to show the other person who they really are for 90 days. They're willing to just put up with whatever and not say anything. And then 90 days later, when they finally are willing to show who they really are, it seems like a total change, a totally different person. Yeah.
Yeah. I've witnessed that as well.
Yeah. So that tolerating of behaviors comes from people being afraid to be honest. when you first meet this person and you're getting into this relationship, you're like, well, if they know who I really am, they won't like me.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like you.
Because they don't know who you
That's
are.
right. Right. If you're
You're
a completely different person,
then they don't like that
then
person.
they don't like that person.
This is true.
This is the reason why everybody has to be willing to just be who you are.
Mm-hmm.
There's somebody out there who's going to like you just the way you are.
Mm-hmm.
And, everybody needs to make changes or some growth in their life, but you can't be hiding who you really are behind who that person wants you to be.
Another part of that is most people don't want what comes with the I don't like this part. Like,
Yeah.
they're not willing to, most people are not willing in a healthy way to walk through what they don't like about that situation or that moment or that affect or that question or whatever it is.
Yeah.
They don't feel comfortable doing that. Most people don't want confrontation.
That's true.
Most people actually don't have an answer sometimes for the things that they're doing.
Yeah.
And so it gets shut up or shut in, but later it comes out.
Yeah. There's an interesting part in the first chapter that I want to read, which is very pertinent to what we're talking about now. So it says, after the wedding, I don't think I changed. I continued to express love to her as I had before marriage. I told her how beautiful she was. I told her how much I loved her. I told her how proud I was to be her husband. But a few months after marriage, she started complaining about petty things at first, like not like me not taking the garbage out or not hanging up my clothes. That part is the tolerating. So she didn't complain for the first few months because she was tolerating all the things that she disliked that her husband was doing. And then after a few months, she's like, well, now I got to talk about it.
Right.
Because it's built up and it's making a resentment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another part that came before that, actually, I'm going to talk about that part and then I can jump back. But on top of that, it immediately when I'm looking at this and he talked about things changing, all I could see here were a lot of words that were going on. And immediately my mind was like, well, maybe she don't like what you're saying.
Yeah.
That could be a part of it. But of course, it goes right into that in the next part of it.
Yeah.
And so the other part that stood out to me was when he says, the honeymoon was a disaster and we never recovered.
Yeah.
That's jacked up. But the second part was we only dated 6 months. And I hear people talk about it a lot. They quantify knowing somebody based on a time frame. Like I've known people who literally hit it off and they hit it off, knew each other a very short time, and they've been together for years.
Yeah.
And then there's people who dated for a long, long time and still don't know each other.
That's true.
So when I saw this timeline thing here, I immediately thought to myself, how many facts did they have? How much information did they have of who that person really is? Like you said,
Yeah.
do you have enough facts about who this person really is, whether it's 2 weeks, 1 month, or 3 years?
Because a lot of people are showing the best representation of themselves for a very long time. It's not the real version of themselves.
Right.
It's the best possible representation that I can give you.
Right.
And so that you don't see any of the cracks in the personality or any of those things. And then about 90 days later, when you can't hold up this facade anymore, they'll come out and be like, well, this is just me. It's like, wait a minute, that hasn't been you for the last 90 days.
Right.
This is a totally different person.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you mind? I want to introduce something from our conversation early
Yeah.
on. I remember us early on, and I don't know if it's from experience or age or otherwise, but it was, let's just get straight to it.
Yeah.
I remember saying to you, listen, I'm emotional. I'm not crazy, but I could lose it a little bit, and I'm going to need you to reel me back in. I remember saying that early on because it was important that you needed to know that that's not part of who I am all the time, but it's going to come out.
Yeah.
I needed not to scare you.
You warned me with that a few times. And I remember also early on in our conversation, which took a while for you to grasp this concept. I used to explain to you that I don't change.
I know. Yes.
I don't change. I will grow, but I don't change. And that just means that I'm solidified in who Yah has created me to be. Like, I know who I am. I know whose I am. I know what he sent me to do. And I'm not going to change. I will grow, which means the things that I learn are going to add to my personality, but I'm not going to do some random change all of a sudden.
And when you first hear that come from anyone's mouth, never, by the way, I'll never hear anyone speak that way. The first thing most people would think, because we could be very critical of a thing we hear that we don't understand, is say, he arrogant.
Yeah.
Like, you're a little pompous, right? However, when I finally did understand what you meant by that, what were you saying to me alongside of being solidified and saying that you know who you are and whose you are, taking that into account, it's like, he's saying, you can count on me being who I am.
Yeah.
This is who I am. I'm not telling you that I'm a person that won't make adjustments, and the word is clear in 2 Peter, we add to our faith, our knowledge, more. So we're adding to what we already are, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
But we're called to add to those things. And you're like, I can add. But who I
Right.
am on the foundation is very solid.
Yes, and that is very important. There's a part in the book where he says, we're still in that first chapter, and he says, I can't believe that it happened to me 3 times. He's talking about his divorces and relationships.
Yes.
It's like, I can't believe it happened 3 times. First, that's denial, right? And he says, and those who don't divorce, do they learn to live with the emptiness, or does love really stay alive in some marriages? If so, how? And that's really the core of what we're talking about.
Right.
First, being in denial. Sometimes we're in denial that the problem is actually us. If you have experienced the same thing in multiple relationships, like every relationship that you're in, you have the same problems, the same complaint, the problem is probably you.
Yeah, you're the constant.
Yes. You're the only
You're
thing
the
that's
only constant.
Yes, stayed the same in all the relationships.
Yes.
So that's something for people to be mindful of.
Yes. And I like that the Most High uses relationships to expose that part. Very patient, right? Opportunity after opportunity for you to see that part of your character. Unfortunately, for some, it takes multiple relationships.
Yeah.
Like
And this is really the power of having a relationship with Yahweh and Yahweh Shai, is having the right relationship will teach you how to have relationships with other people. When you don't have a positive model or some example of what love really is, then we dream up what we think it is in our mind and we live according to it. We treat people according to our definition of love.
Right.
The Bible is literally the best book on love and marriage and relationships that has ever been written.
Agree.
But some people don't see it that way. They just see it as a big book of stories and rules and things that they can't do.
They do. Instead of seeing it as an entire relationship being walked through, a very intimate, dwelling relationship. Like, nobody talks like that. I want to dwell with you. Oh, yeah.
I want to dwell with you.
Nobody talks like that,
Right.
but that's what, and not only that, it's not only in words, but it's in actions that is demonstrated. I feel like the Most High is the best at doing all 5 of these love languages.
Absolutely.
Plus.
He created them all,
Right.
so he's got to be the best. Look, that reminds me of a scripture really quickly. I'm going into the book of Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25, and it gives an instruction. Now, I'm going to start this one at verse 22 because it starts with the wives, and it says, wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto Adonai. Now, that is very important because what it's telling you is that he's the head of you. Submit to him, not everybody else's opinion.
That's right.
Don't be concerned with what everybody else thinks. The same way when it comes to our relationship with the Father, we need to be concerned with what the Father thinks, not with what the world thinks of anything that we do.
This is true.
So we see that the relationship with the wife is the same way that it should be with the Father. It's a mirror image. And then it says, wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto Adonai. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Hamashiach is the head of the church, and he is the savior of the body. Now watch, I'm going to jump down to verse 25. We're in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25, because here's the instruction for the man. It says, husbands, love your wives. And you're like, I do love my wife. And then he says, nah, not like that.
Right.
He says, even as Hamashiach also loved the church and gave himself for it. That means the man is going to have to learn to make some sacrifices in the relationship for his wife.
Right.
Yeah.
You said something key. There's an aspect in there. It's not possible to know who you are and whose you are if the focal point isn't always on the Most High. We've been trained from upbringing, like transgenerationally, that other people's thoughts is supposed to weigh in on us.
Yeah.
We're taught that. What your neighbor thinks, what your cousin thinks, what what your employer at your job
What
thinks,
everybody
what
thinks.
anyone thinks. You're trained to think that way, and so the Most High unravels that.
Amen. There's a section in there's another section that I want to read because it talks about this exact issue. People looking for books, other books besides the scriptures, and finding relationship counselors and all of that stuff. It says, why is it that a couple can attend a communication workshop, hear wonderful ideas on how to enhance communication, return home, and find themselves totally unable to implement the communication patterns demonstrated? And the answer for that is really simple. When you are there sitting in the audience, you're ready and you're willing, but you are not yet at the place of application. To receive the information is one thing. Like everybody who's watching us right now, they're receiving this information.
Right.
They have to come up with a way to implement these things, to apply them to their lives, or else it's just going to be head knowledge.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. There was a area in relations to it says, with all the help available from media experts, why is it that so few couples seem to have found the secret to keeping love alive after the wedding?
Yeah.
And it reminded me of how our minds are set up, which we were talking about that a little bit, which in Romans 12:2, it talks about the renewing of our minds. A lot of people have the same thinking concept, and they don't have the concept of what the Most High says love is, which you said earlier on.
Yeah. I totally agree. Like our minds have to be renewed. Whether you're just getting into a relationship, don't go into the new relationship with the old mind, thinking about things that happened in your previous relationship.
That's correct.
And if you're in a relationship right now, for anybody that's listening to us, and that relationship has been a struggle, you can be the one to change it right now by applying the things that the scripture says, the love that is demonstrated by the Messiah. You can apply those things in your own relationship.
Yeah, that's true.
I have a note right here because application is really the key to making it happen. So watch. 7 steps. I came up with this earlier today. First step is analyze the way that it is now and write it down. Whatever it is in the relationship, analyze the way that it is right now and write it down. Step 2 is discuss it with your partner. Step 3 is come to an agreement that it is that way. That's the first part because people have different perspectives. They see things differently. You might write it down and be like, this is how I see it. And then the other person's like, I don't see it that way at all. Okay, so we can't create a solution until we both can agree on what the problem is.
Yeah.
So step 3 is come to an agreement that it is that way. Step 4 is write down the way that you want it to be. And step 5 is discuss it with your partner. Now you've identified the problem and you're moving into the solution area. Now, after you have discussed it, come to an agreement to make it that way. And the thing that happens most often in these things is we'll talk about how to do it, but we won't actually do it. It's the lack of application.
Yeah.
Step 7 is make it the way that you want it, right? So in that breakdown that I came up with today, in both areas, you have to find some type of agreement. If you're not searching for an agreement, then you're leaving all the room open for disagreements and arguments.
True. So you're saying, yes, how can two walk together unless they agree? But the agreement means that we agree to do this thing
Yeah.
together
That's right.
in this way,
That's right.
right? Meaning, because I remember us having a conversation before. There's the thought process of agree, a disagree,
Right.
to disagree, or there's argument,
That's right.
right? The argument is not the good part,
No.
not at all, right? So even if the two people have disagreed about a thing, and they have agreed that they don't see it the same way, but they're capable of still moving forward in doing X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Even though they don't agree about this particular thing, it's not affecting another area.
That's right.
You've been able to make a next step to move forward.
In every conversation, I usually tell people that have a problem communicating that the lack of confirmation is what's making their conversations not work. In every conversation, you have to confirm or deny.
Right.
You either have to say yes or no in every conversation.
Yay or nay.
In order for the person to move forward and say, well, let me make my next point. Nah, you haven't agreed with the previous point. So we have to confirm or deny all the time.
In doing so, it's interesting to have someone actually do that. And the reason is, I feel like it almost holds them accountable. Let your yay be yay and your nay be nay, because they actually have to consider, do I really want to do this?
Yeah.
I'm about to say yes to this. Do I really want to do this?
Yeah.
And hopefully they've taken some time to consider that.
Usually not.
Let me see, what else up in this book?
I like how he transitioned within that first chapter into introducing the idea of languages. Let's talk about that for a second.
I have it pegged right here. I was
good.
just on it. Yes.
Because he says, the problem is that we have overlooked one fundamental truth. People speak different love languages.
They do.
And we absolutely do. So real quick off the top of your head, do you remember all 5 of the love languages?
I believe I might. I haven't gone through them in my head in a minute. I'm not looking.
You turned the book
No,
over.
no, I did not. I don't
Just
do
like,
that.
I
I turned
believe
it over
I know
so
it.
I can
Oh, okay.
do. Stop it.
Okay, go.
Okay, let me just. Okay, so what is it? It's affirmations,
Words of affirmation.
words of affirmation, acts of service,
Acts of service. Yeah, that's right.
gifts,
Okay, the giving of gifts,
physical touch,
physical touch,
and quality time.
quality time. Very good. And so everyone demonstrates love using one of these 5 actions. Those are all actions. It's not just a thought, but that's you actually doing something.
Yeah.
People demonstrate romantic love by using one of those 5 actions. The problem is you may not demonstrate it the same way that you desire to receive it. So if one person is constantly giving words of affirmation, I love you, I love you, I love you, but their partner in the relationship, if they speak a different primary love language, the love is going to feel like the communication is off. The same way, like if you started speaking in Hebrew and I only spoke in English, it wouldn't matter what you were saying.
Right.
Because I would be like, huh? That doesn't make sense to me.
All right.
Right?
Yeah, he even uses the example that if your spouse speaks English, your spouse speaks Chinese and you speak English, you guys are speaking a foreign language you don't understand. And having lived in Southeast Asia for 13 years, you don't get things. I mean, you can get body language from people, but things get lost in translation and even misinterpreting someone's communication because all you have are facial expressions.
Yeah.
You can get their energy wrong, on a thing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
So when it comes to the love languages, one of the primary things that people have to do is identify their own love language, right? So are you someone who demonstrates love by speaking words, or do you do things for people, or do you believe that spending time is the way that you demonstrate love? You have to know yourself before you can know somebody else. The scripture is literally like, know ye not yourselves?
Right.
Okay, the second thing after you get to know yourself is knowing that other person's primary language. Out of the 5 languages, like I would say one thing that makes our relationship work is we're both very fluent. And we're fluent in the language, meaning we speak multiple versions of it. So I can give it to you this way and you can receive it. You give it back to me that way. Other people may not even realize what the other person's primary love language is.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's like saying, I really want to talk to this person, but I don't know what language they speak. And every time I start talking to them, they're looking at me like I'm crazy because we're not speaking the same language.
Yes.
I feel like this happens a lot in relationships that have, you've been in the relationship for a very long time and the people have just gotten comfortable with the miscommunication.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ways to figure out why are we miscommunicating so often is, are you expressing love one way and I'm receiving it a different way?
Mm.
Yeah.
I also find that it also depends on the relationship. For example, right? In our relationship, I wouldn't mind if there was physical touch, but I don't want somebody else touching me. And I could be close to them.
Yeah.
That wouldn't speak love to me if they were hugging me. I'm not actually a big huggy person.
Yeah, you are.
If they come up to
You
me and
hug
grab
everybody.
I hug everybody.
Okay.
But I don't necessarily want to be grabbed up. It's almost like I don't necessarily, I give that language, but I don't necessarily want someone gripping me up that way.
But you give that language.
I do give it.
As an expression of love to the person. That's what I mean. The way that the language that you're speaking and the language that you want to be spoken to in may not be the same language.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Or even by the same person. I think it differs the person. Like there's things I can accept from you that I find that's love. It speaks love to me.
Yeah.
But if someone else did it, it doesn't resonate the same way.
That makes sense. Yeah. We feel most comfortable speaking our primary love language, and everybody needs to know what that is. Mm-hmm. Everybody needs to be able to say, this is how I express love.
Yes.
And then once you can say that, like, so if I say to you, well, I express love by saying, I love you all the time. You try that to me. You tell me, you speak my language now. Tell me that you love me all the time so I can see how that feels. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And after a while, I'm like, yeah, I don't really feel like, I feel like we need to spend more time together. We have to be able to experiment with these different things and find the one that resonates best. But without this book, which I bet the majority of the people watching or listening to our episode, they may have never heard of it. So this is just another tool that you're going to have in the box to help you build a better relationship.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, it's a great book. It reminded me of, as we were talking about people not being able to understand each other, or the love language or speaking that love language for another person. It reminded me in 1 Corinthians, let me see, I wrote it down. 1 Corinthians 13, when he kept talking about what is it, like, you have it pulled up?
Yeah, let me.
Because I don't have my
1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse what?
1.
Verse 1, it says, though I speak with the tongue of men and of angels and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And so what's interesting in the King James is because the King James has taken the word that most Bibles translate as love and use the word charity.
Yeah.
And I often explain charity is the action that love produces.
That's right.
Because you can just say, oh, I love you, but you don't do anything.
Right.
So there has to be an action behind it to demonstrate the type of love that it is. So Paul is saying, yeah, even though I can speak all different languages, if that doesn't produce an action, it's just noise.
Which was what the 5 love languages are. They're actions for people to be able to demonstrate.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So out of the 5 love languages, what would you say is give me top 2. What's your top 2?
Wait, aren't you supposed to answer that for me?
No,
okay.
I am.
All right, let me see. My top 2.
Yeah.
Easy one off the bat is words of affirmation.
Yeah.
All right. Let me see the second one. I feel like I'm a chameleon of them. I feel like there are a bunch of them.
That's what I mean when I say you're fluent.
Yeah.
You can do all of those things.
I can do all of them.
You can demonstrate all of them and
I can receive all of them.
That's what makes our relationship work. Yeah. Now, watch this. If I thought, let's say you weren't fluid and you had a primary one and it was quality time. If your primary language was spending quality time together and I didn't know that, and I was constantly telling you, babe, but I love you. I
Right.
love you. I love you. I love you.
Right.
You would not feel like I love you just because I'm saying it.
That's right.
But then when you would invite me to do something like go here with me,
Right.
do this thing with me, and I'm
Right.
like, nah, I don't want to do that. You would feel the opposite of love.
That's correct.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And a lot of people are not aware of that.
Yeah. And I think some people don't think that way because they don't want to do it. That's not something they do.
Yeah.
Right. Like, for example, I know one of your love languages is quality time.
Yeah.
I know you enjoy the quality time. I enjoy the quality time because you enjoy the quality time. It might not naturally be something I might do this thing, like maybe sit and watch X amount of videos, but I do enjoy it
Yeah.
because I enjoy spending that time with you, and it speaks your love language.
Yeah.
Most people don't invest in wanting to know that. They think, I don't want to do it, so they don't do it.
You're absolutely right. And thinking of it as an actual spoken language, most people will not take the time to learn another language
Nope.
so that they can communicate,
Right.
no matter how much they supposedly love someone.
Right.
They're like, if you want to talk to me, you're going to talk to me in the language that I speak.
Speak, right?
That's not how it works. That is not how it
No,
works.
it's not. Yeah.
Think about it. So like for people that have the ability to speak more than one language, there is a primary language, and it's the language that you think in. So if I were to think to do something to demonstrate my love toward you, I'm going to think in my primary language. So everybody needs to know what their primary language is and then be able to express that
Yeah.
before you can translate it into the language, the secondary language. Very important. What language are you thinking in? You know?
That's a good question. What language are you thinking in?
I'm telling you, when I say I'm fluent, it's I want to speak all of them very
Understand that.
well, you know? And it's a process of learning yourself and also learning the person that you're with. Because if one of your primary languages, the other person does not receive well, it will put a strain or stress on the relationship.
Yeah. So what is your primary language?
My primary language is also words of affirmation. Yeah, because I'm rooted in words, but then I would say it's physical touch is right underneath that. I feel like if you don't touch me, you don't love me.
Yeah.
And everybody who loves me touches me. That's how I feel. Yeah.
It's funny because I remember having a conversation with you that my mind was like, but sometimes you don't. And you're like, well, it depends.
Yeah.
It depends. I think sometimes people get timing wrong on the love languages as well. Right? So if you are busy doing something and occupied, and I come in and want to give you a back rub, but you're busy.
Yeah.
That's not the time. It's not translating into love
Yeah.
at that moment, even though it is your love language.
Yeah.
It's not translating because the timing on it is wrong. It's not meeting a need. It's actually deterring something that needs to get done.
It can be viewed as a distraction at
Yes.
that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. But timing is something that people just have to learn. When we say in a relationship we have good chemistry, that usually means we have good timing.
Yeah.
Or we vibe
We
together.
vibe well.
Really
Yeah.
Yes.
Our love languages,
Yeah.
you speak my love language,
Yeah.
you know?
That
Yeah.
basically means you're picking up what I'm putting down.
So true. This is a good book.
Absolutely. So this first chapter is really just an introductory chapter introducing everyone to the 5 love language and how people can understand emotional love. It's when we get into the next chapter and our next episode that things are going to really start to get deep and we'll start finding some actionable acts, which makes perfect sense. The way that Dr. Chapman wrote this book is excellent because first he's like, let's figure out what the problem is.
Yeah.
Possible problem, possible solution, and now let's dive into actionable steps. Most people don't do that. They know that there's a problem, like there's a problem in the relationship. You're not even identifying what the problem is. You're immediately going into how you feel about the problem.
Yeah.
How you feel about the problem is never going to be part of the solution. Well, I don't want to deal with this. Doesn't matter. We still have to deal with it.
Right.
Well, I hate that this is happening to me. Doesn't matter how you feel about it. We still got to come up with a solution. How you feel about it is never going to be part of the solution.
Right. Yeah. Right. But people got their feelings.
People stay in their feelings. I guess I be in my feelings sometimes too, but I've learned to balance them very well. The scriptures teach you how to remain in the spirit. Right?
Yeah, it does.
Walk in the spirit and you shall not fulfill the lusts of the flesh is what the scripture says.
Right.
There's a part at the end of the first chapter. It says, seldom do a husband and wife have the same primary emotional love language. We tend to speak our primary love language, and we become confused when our spouse does not understand what we're communicating. We are expressing our love, but the message does not come through because we are speaking what to them is a foreign language.
Yeah.
This is part of the reason why when I talk, because being understood is so important to me that I will often, after every few lines, say, does that make sense? That gives people the opportunity to say, no, I don't get it. So that I can re-explain it again, because being understood is crucial to communication.
Yeah, it is.
We can talk for 45 minutes, and if the person's like, yeah, I didn't get nothing from what you said, or they're like, I'm sorry, you lost me? No, I never wanted to be like, you lost me in something that you said.
All right. Yeah. But it is like, I remember someone saying before, and I didn't quite understand it at first until she explained it. She was like, I'm learning to get a PhD in my spouse and my husband.
Yeah.
And as she further demonstrated in her actions was she made every effort to get to know what translated into love for him. Because in that, his tank was always going to be full.
Yeah.
Versus depleted. And she knew when it was depleted because there were actions that are produced when someone doesn't feel loved.
Yeah.
Things like rejection, anger, and all these other things that arise up when people don't feel that they are loved. Their tank is empty or depleted.
And that kind of leads us into the next chapter, which is about how to keep the tank full, how to constantly be making deposits in there instead of withdrawals. Because if you're only making withdrawals, the tank is going to be empty real quick.
Yeah.
And then because all relationships are reciprocal, it's going to be very difficult for you to get something unless you have something to give.
Yeah, you can't go to the bank and be like, "Can I get some money out?" And you ain't put no money in.
That's right.
It doesn't work like that.
I remember once I used to work at a bank. I've had a million jobs, and there was a lady who called. I was in customer service. She would call on the phone, and she would be like, "My checks are bouncing. Something must be wrong." She was serious, and she's like, she said to me on the phone, I can't be out of money because I still have checks in my checkbook.
Oh,
She didn't understand the principle of this thing.
checks and balances.
Yes, she didn't understand this thing.
Oh,
And some people's relationship is the same way.
it's the same way. Yeah, they keep writing checks that they can't cash.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to discuss from this first chapter?
Let me see. I gotta dip in here one more time and make sure. No, what? Okay, because it keeps saying it over and over again. Is learning the love languages as a second language. It again. I have to go back to being in another country. I remember that when I did learn the language of the country, it would be my second. It allowed an instant bond to occur between me and the people. Yeah. The same thing happens where it's an unspoken. Those actions translate into words. It's really beautiful where they began to embrace me as part of their people, literally calling me their people.
Yeah.
Because the bond felt so close because the language made us connect.
Yeah.
Same thing with love, like the love languages. Knowing what another person's love language is can provide an instant connection. And can you imagine maintaining that and knowing that and providing that all the time? That's a constant connection.
Yeah.
A bond that can't be broken. So there's some people that are like, yo, we could not talk to each other for 2 years. We pick up where we left off,
Yeah.
and it's like, our time never ended. It's because they're able to still, even across time and technology, to still communicate the love language to that person.
I agree.
So
Absolutely.
maybe minus the physical touch, but when they hug each other, when they see each other, maybe that makes up
Maybe.
for it.
There's so many different ways to express, but you can't express anything without a language.
That's
Gotta
right.
have that part for it.
Right.
And you're right. It's soon as people, when we have a good vibe with someone, it's usually because we have something in common. And that thing that works in common is being able to speak the same language.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I'd have to agree. Anything
right.
else for you?
Nope. That was a great kind of introduction. That first chapter is just really a warm up. So we're going to get into this next chapter in our next episode of Israelite Life. And one of the things that I want to point out is that even though this book we're not reading from the Bible, all of these principles are found in the Bible.
Yes.
And there are several Bible references in the book that he uses because, the man is a Christian who wrote this book. But more, he is a professional relationship counselor. For everybody who's looking for some professional help, they look at their spouse and they're like, you need professional help. Okay, but you don't have the money to go and get it. But you do need some tools.
Yes.
This book, you can pick it up for less than $10 on Amazon, especially if you use our Amazon link down below.
Down below.
You can pick this book up. It's a very small book. You can read it within a week, but you will spend the rest of your life applying these things. But I can honestly say, if you apply them, you will make a difference.
That's right.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
So just try it out.
Yeah.
What harm could it do?
I want to challenge our viewers to get a copy of this book, continue watching our episodes here as we go through the book. If you have questions on any of the things that were said in our episode here or that you find in the book, you're like, well, how does this work? Post them in the comments down below if you're watching on YouTube, or post them on the comments so that we can address them in our next videos. Because if I challenge you, you'll do this. And if you do this, it will make your relationship better.
Agree.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Israelite Life. Shalom.
Shalom.
You have been listening to the Israelite Life podcast with Prophet and Katryna. We hope you have enjoyed this time together. Make sure you subscribe and catch a new episode every Monday morning at 6 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Shalom and be blessed.